I'm continuing my discussion of the Florida history standards, which, by the way, don't just focus on slavery, but go beyond slavery to cover Reconstruction, to cover the early 20th century, the rise of segregation, Jim Crow, the lynchings, and then, of course, the continuing press efforts to produce reform, the Civil Rights Movement, World War II, Brown versus Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act, and so on. So I want to highlight some topics covered by these standards to give you an idea that this is not all about, it's not about the one line saying that slaves learned some skills. That is just a preposterous distortion of what these standards are about. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves who were in enemy territory, and Lincoln admitted this was a war measure. But the 13th Amendment did do that. And by the way, virtually all Democrats voted against it. That's not mentioned in the history standards. The 14th Amendment, equal rights under the law. You'd think everybody would be for that. No, the Democrats overwhelmingly opposed that. And the 15th Amendment, which is the right to vote, the Democrats overwhelmingly opposed that. So this is what I mean when I say that the democratic responsibility, the evil machinations of the Democrats who tried to block these amendments is not highlighted as I believe it should be. Instruction includes similarities and differences between serfdom and slavery. Now, this is really important because slavery didn't sort of come out of nowhere. And particularly in the West, slavery grew out of serfdom. It may also be said that in America, slavery grew out of indentured servitude. Now, the reason that the left doesn't like all this is because they want slavery to be in a unique category by itself. If slavery can be equated with serfdom, well, there were really hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of serfs. Serfdom was widespread, for example, in Russia. And suddenly slavery doesn't seem unique to blacks. It doesn't appear to be purely racial. And similarly, there were lots of whites who were indentured servants in the United States. So the moment you say indentured servitude and slavery are on a continuum, you're beginning to blast the democratic narrative. So you can see what the Democrats want here is they want simplification. They want slavery truly to be, you may say, a black and white issue. They don't want ambiguity. They don't even want truth, because the truth is, in many senses, complicated. Let's continue. Instruction includes the transition from an indentured to a slave-based economy. Again, if there's a transition from the one to the other, it shows that the early whites, the Irish, the Italians, and others who came as indentured servants, well, most of the indentured servants came from England and from Ireland, that somehow they were, if not slaves, they were something akin to slaves. And there's a very good book about this. I think it's called White Cargo that talks about this. Explain the effect of the cotton industry on the expansion of slavery due to Eli Whitney's cotton gin. This is, again, something the Democrats don't really want to talk about. Why? Because they want to attack the founders. Oh, the founders are responsible for the massive expansion of slavery that occurred. No, the founders are not responsible for it. Why? Because in the 18th century, it looked like slavery was going down. Slavery was being reduced. Slavery was on its way out. Jefferson thought so. The U.S. Congress wanted to help with ways for that to happen. They blocked the slave trade. They set a date, I think 1808, for the ending of the slave trade, all in the expectation that slavery was going to wither away. But then it was Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin, I'm pretty sure I have the date right, 1793, that gave a huge impetus to the plantations, to the cotton industry. Suddenly, slavery became immensely profitable, and so there was a kind of revitalization of slavery in the 19th century in the South that was led by a new party that was set up to defend and protect slavery, namely the Democratic Party. So you can see how here, there's a lot here that young people do need to know. And the Florida guidelines are going in the right direction, but again, they're minimizing, they're not highlighting the role of the Democratic Party. And case after case, we see this to be the case. Instruction includes the similarities between serfdom and slavery and emergence of the term slave in the experience of Slavs. Now, here's another, well, to quote Al Gore, inconvenient truth for the Democrats, which is, where does the word slave even come from? Well, it turns out slavery has existed since ancient times. It existed in China, in India, in Africa. American Indians had slaves long before Columbus. But the actual word slave comes from the word Slav. And this highlights the fact that all over Europe, there were white slaves, and they were taken mainly from the so-called Slavic peoples. And so the Slavs were so commonly enslaved that their name became the word for slave. But again, the Democrats don't like this. The left doesn't like this. Why? Because it highlights that slavery, again, isn't just purely a black issue. We're talking about slavery preceding, slavery going back to the dawn of history, being coeval, we may almost say, with mankind. And you're talking about the fact that you had white slaves no less than black slaves. And even American Indians were enslaved for a time, although eventually slavery, for reasons we need to go into, became, in the United States, it did become a black and white issue. Have you heard about the Durban Accords? This is the greatest threat to the US dollar's global dominance in the past 80 years. On August 22nd, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are expected to announce the launch of a new international supercurrency fully backed by gold or other commodities. It's part of a long-term plan to supplant the US and the dollar as the cornerstones of the global financial system. Well, how can you protect your IRA or 401k from the fallout from this landmark announcement? Well, you can diversify with gold from Birch Gold Group. Historically, gold has been a safe haven in times of high uncertainty, which is right now. Get a free information kit on gold IRAs and decide for yourself if a tax-sheltered retirement account backed by physical precious metals is right for you. Text the word Dinesh to 989898. There's a monumental shift happening among nations that control 1/3 of the world GDP starting August 22nd. Protect your retirement savings. Text Dinesh to the number 989898 and claim your free information kit on gold from Birch Gold.